And then there's a little bit of a highlight on this other side of it that's picking up over here. And there's going to be a little one over there. And you can see how it's starting to take shape. Now with my same soft brush, I'm going to wipe it out really well. I use a lot of paper towels. I just found it's just not worth getting all messed up. At this point, I should probably scrape my palette. You can sort of tie, if you got enough paint, you can just take a clean brush and soften those two, sort of knit them together. And this is where it will really start to feel like it. Start turning form. Back of your finger, I just use it a little bit here. If you guys ever, some of you might have a brush that's a fan brush, but I don't know if I got mine out.
Mine.
That's okay. I'm just. Well, yeah, let me see it real quick. I'll show you. If you got a fan brush, sometimes with a fan brush like this, you can take just the very corner of it, not the whole thing, but just the corner of it, and the corner of it you can really do some really intricate work, just tying, like just softening that up. You can see how that's just really starting to turn form nicely. We got the Coarse Shadow, we've got the Halftone where it's really intense, and now I'm going to add just a little bit of lighter that I see on the top of the orange. There's just a little bit lighter with some white mixed with it, and this is going to be right against the shadow edge. Just keep going with the yellow though. Keep it intense. Keep going with the yellow. This is my focal point, so I want to make it really special. I'm getting it a little bit too, and then over here. But you can see as I'm painting the colors in, I get a thicker paint stroke, and then I just leave that stroke. You got to think in terms of, if you've got your brush, and then we'll put that stem in. That stem's got a lot of kind of orange on the back of the. Kind of dark right down to the base of it. This is some detail stuff. Now I'm just showing you a few little things that are sort of detail stuff. I don't have a lot of paint up here, so I might need to be a little more aggressive to soften that line. Got to soften this. I want to soften this here a little bit. There's some really cool things going on in this large shape with this large white pumpkin, and because you see some really nice coarse shadows, I'm going to try to put this coarse shadow in right here.
There's some orange in there.
Yeah, you can see that, right? Remember, if you can see it, what?
You can paint it. You can achieve it.
Exactly. Sometimes when I paint in and sometimes it's right where the coarse shadow is, that's sort of not either warm nor cool. And then I'm going to just sort of blend that down into this lighter area. Now there's a little tiny bit of a halftone on the right side. You see it's just a little bit darker there. I'm just going to And then I can see just a little bit of this line here, and then down here it gets a little bit dark as it gets into that. You can see how that's starting to really form and take shape. One thing you can do is for that orange, because of my underpainting, is rather than paint it in, let's see if we can pull a little bit of it out. So that's kind of nice. And then I can go back, and on the other bump here, there's a little bit of back to the shadow. It's too much. Be careful here. Getting too. But you want to just do this. This is a real subtle thing near the end. This is detail stuff. And I'm showing. It's a bit of a cast shadow right here. And then you'll see some more reflected light. Let's just go ahead and try it also with some reflected light right from the... I'm going right down into this orange, and I'm just mixing it right into here. Let's just try it. This is where it gets really fun, and bouncing colors around. So it really starts to relate to each other right here. In the background, kind of like this sort of dark color back here, and I can really, now I'm really shaping. I'm really following the shape, and I'm cutting into it where I want that shape to be.
What is that color?
Not sure. Something cool that was on my palette. Back, what I see back there is all these different things going on. I just want something nice and dark, because it's really going to make some drama. But you see how this is really coming out with this light. Oh, I bet you my tape's almost out now.
No,
Is it still going?
I don't know, but we need to make sure.
It's blinking. What does that mean?
Probably that it's done. But that's okay, because I can always add to it if I need. Let me show you just a couple of highlights on this larger thing. And be careful with the highlights, because they're just kind of small areas that the light's really bumping into there. This has been a quick demo, but you can see again the important thing, how I just really laid in the color for everything before I get into any details. Values, and then lay in the colors. What I want to do right now is I've got to get this fan brush would be good. Just a little bit lighter. Right around here. This is close to the light source. Pretty bright over here. Edges, I'm thinking about edges also. I haven't talked about that. Not like it's not really cut out. And this is getting a little bit of a brighter light right here. Right around this. And then it sort of fades off. And that's a nice way to use a fan brush. One side paint, one side drag. And this is kind of down in that little dimple area. We're at a point where we're starting to see things all together in relationship. I've got I've got all of my colors laid in, light side, dark side, and I can start to relate everything and looking at my still life setup and checking to see how the relationships look here. So I'm just going to keep painting in here, and I'm going to start working on kind of tying things together and making it, bringing it a little bit more to a greater finish. I notice a little bit more shadow as this turns away from the light. That's getting a little more in the shadow, and to create the darker value of that orange, I've gone into the orange itself and added maybe a little tiny bit of the blue. It's too much. Back a little bit to the red because it's still a little, it's a darker version of this orange. It's not just completely grayed out. And right there is actually the Coarse Shadow. Turns the form. And then we get up into what we call the halftones again. You can see those really intense, nice oranges. There's some of that orange that we had. I'm going to go into my warm yellow and cad red light. See if I can get some of that. Now I don't want to get it quite as intense as stuff up in here, but maybe it's going to be close. It's a little bit back here in the background. I don't want to draw attention to it too much. Maybe a little bit of the dark red. That's it. A shadow there of the stem. Cast shadow in there. Nice thing about a cast shadow too is sometimes the cast shadow helps describe the form. See how it wraps around and it goes down around. It's kind of nice that way. Now we see some of these lines, but they're not really lines, they're just sort of crevices, and they're very subtle. Very subtle. Sometimes the back end of the brush works as a good tool. Soften things up. Khoka Shadow down here is quite dark. Adding a little bit of just a tiny bit of the blue into that kind of darker orange color to get a darker version, but again it's still back into the red a little bit. It's still kind of a warm dark orange, still a dark side of the orange. Quite dark down here, plus it's probably picking up some of the dark back into it from the sort of squashed here. A little bit of reflected light down there. It's starting to feel like it's really starting to form here. This is coming along quite nice. I like this Coarse Shadow. There might be a couple of places that would be opportunities to show a little bit of some detail. Some of these, like where the light comes down a little lower here, let's go and grab in some of this orange. So we'd get some of the yellow, a bit of the medium. Try this. It's a little bit more orange. This is sort of in that halftone area where the colors are very intense. So right here I want to try that's it. Just a little bit of a drag. So that shows that little crevice coming down. We have a little bit of a one coming down here too. This gets pretty, let's get some red in there, this right along. Yeah, that real paint's getting kind of thick at this point. Right here. Here I have a really soft sable brush that I'll go in here and sort of soften this Coarse Shadow here. And need to pull a little bit of that dark right up into there. Now, it's really starting to feel like it's turning. One more back here, kind of wraps around here. Laying the paint on. Right underneath here, we've got some really nice reflected light. I started to get it in there, but it's really a little bit. You got to be careful with reflected lights. Reflected lights are still on the shadow side, so don't let the light, the word light, trick you into making it lighter than it really is. Still a light, but it's darker than this light's on the light side. This might appear kind of light here, but I'm going to blend it in. I look at my painting through a mirror because it gives me a view that I'm not used to looking. And that view, looking at it, it flips it backwards, and I see things that are either too light, too much color, too dark, shapes out. Really helpful. I want to get into the cast shadow a little bit more again. So I'm just mixing up a little bit of some ultramarine blue, a little bit of alizarin crimson, kind of this purplish, maybe a little orange in there. Kill it a little bit. Orange is complementary to blue. Get this shadow maybe a little bit darker. Just a little darker. Darker yet. Kill the blue a little bit. Go into a little alizarin crimson. Let's try that. Like that. The shadows that are closer to you, or as the viewer here, will appear to be a little darker. Whereas the shadows back here that move back might appear a little bit lighter. It moves them back into the space just a little bit. Seems to be a little better shadow here. It's a little more natural. Darken that up just a little bit more. That increases some, gives it a little more drama, a little more light. I'm going to go work here back onto this. There's some really nice forms here. There's a really nice halftone right in here. There's the Coarse Shadow here, and but this is all a little bit brighter yet. So if I were to get one of my bigger brushes out, now let's take a look at it for a minute. Sometimes you just make some judgments and see, okay, where do I need to make some lights lighter, darks darker. This is the value that pulling in some light here. A little bit of that green. Ooh, that's too much blue. That's way too much. Oh, that could be something interesting. Let's see what it does up here. A little bit of a back highlight or something. Right, it's too blue. So reach back in here. Let's try it again. Back in a little bit of yellow. It's a bit of a greenish, just a tiny bit of the burnt sienna. The burnt sienna is a nice modifier. Let's see what this does. I want to get this paint a little thicker now. This is where the paint can get a lot thicker. I'm getting some glare on there, sorry about that. I'm just going to get some light in here. See if I can see this. Got quite a bit of paint on my brush and I'm just dragging it lightly right over top. Kind of a scumble back here because it's getting a little darker. I don't want to cover that completely. I like to let some of it be. I'm getting a little bit of that color that I need. The lights are really turning on right here. This is kind of an interesting place right here. Now I'm going to get some of that blue in there. There's a nice halftone, almost sort of a greenish. It's got kind of a greenish tone to it, but it's still in the light, but yet it's a bit of a halftone. So I'm just stepping it into that kind of blue color I had, so it's going to step down. Halftone all the way through here. It's got to get just a little bit darker. Maybe. Yeah, that's actually better. Just stepping it down a little bit. Still on the light side, but it's halftone. As it moves back here, it gets a little bit darker. Bit of it up there too, and there's a little bit of it right here. This halftone has got sort of cooling temperature wise, and so the temperature, when things cool off, it tends to push it away from the light a little more. And that's quite nice. I can take sort of a soft brush and blend this a little. It's a soft, clean brush. Boy, that's really turning there. This has got to get a little bit darker here, but let's see if I can get a little bit of a shadow back to the color that's the shadow that we put over here. This whole side, sort of a shadow color. This is sort of a cast shadow in the stem. I want it to appear like a cast shadow, top form. And then we can shape this a little bit with the darker, picking up a little red from the apple. That's all right, because that color of the apple is going to reflect back into here. That's kind of cool anyway. And then this is back down in the shadow. And drag some of this around. And sometimes when we're painting, I'm painting around the form like that. Just going to drag it around the form like it's going around. Now I have to go back to this other brush, and we're seeing so it comes in to this stem or this button thing area here. I believe this is showing some of the form. Just soften this a little bit here, that heart of an edge. Worried about stuff like this, we can always go back in and clean stuff up in the background. And if I want this to really pop out bright, we can do a little thing with the simultaneous contrast. And really lay in a dark right next to that. So I'm sort of shaping it at the same time. It really puts a lot of drama. And also I'm doing 2 or 3 things with this brush stroke. I'm cleaning up the edge, I'm shaping it, plus I'm darkening the background, which is giving us an appearance that this is really coming out lighter. Can work around this area here as well. The stem is. Same here, this is going to make this jump out a little more as well. And never forget the background. The background's an integral part of the painting. And it really needs to be such. It really needs to have that feeling. It needs to be softened a little bit here. A couple passes around. There's a bit of a coarse shadow. And, well, let's go back to here. This is some really nice reflected light coming up back into here. But I got to be careful again not to make these reflected lights too light. Now I'm kind of just scrubbing down into what I had before in this board. I kind of like it because it's warm. So you got warm, sort of cooling in the coarse shadow area, then you got some warm back again into the reflected light. And it goes back and forth. I haven't really done much on the apple here. One thing we can get back there is a couple of those highlights. Those highlights, because the apple's so shiny, they're very, very light. And I'm still kind of tending towards the red color a little bit. And there's also a nice coarse shadow with those apples, the apple. So I go up here into the crimson, touch just a little tiny bit of the, this is quite dark right here. Ooh, that's way too dark. And lighten it back up with a little bit of the red, the light red. This is really going to help this apple turn form as well. The apple's got a bit of a reflection on it because it's kind of shiny. So there's the core. It's very dark right here. And then I could get some back in again, back where we talk about the midtone right here. It's where the most intense red that you're going to see of the color of the apple. It's where you see most of the color, and you'll have a temptation to put that really beautiful red color everywhere, but remember, everything is nothing. So, and I want to bring up the color a little bit of that red. I don't want to add white because the white will kill it. Add a little bit of the yellow. And this might be a bit bright, but I think, no, that's going to be really nice. So just a little bit of that red, and then some of it's over here on the top. That makes a really nice halftone where you see the actual color of the apple, the local color. Same thing's happening back here on this one. Kind of forgetting about this back here. Kind of in the background, so I don't really want to bring too much attention back here, though. It's kind of nice where the cast shadow on that one's happening. This is sort of a tangent right here. I've got to decide, maybe, I don't know, maybe I just have, on the still life, it looks like the apple's just sitting right in there. It's like sort of like a, it's like they're kissing. It's just sort of like they're touching, and it's kind of creating a tangent. So I'm going to just make a, let's just try something. I'm going to make sort of a design decision and bring this, I think the base of this is up high enough so that if I were to bring this right over top, that'll make it feel like that it's just sort of right behind, the apple's just sort of tucked behind there. Bring this down a little bit. So sometimes you can change your design if it's necessary for, you've got your still life. So now that apple's sort of tucked behind there. Well, I kind of like that. Well, that's much better. However, for that to work, I think I need to bring this up just a little bit higher so that it makes it feel like when objects are up, that go up on your picture plane, they're also going back. So but I think that was a good move. Oh yeah, and I even like some of this red right in here. Let's just keep some of it. That's sort of ties where the apples catching some of the color into there. Haven't done a lot on this one here, but we can do a little bit more on the squash, the actual shape of it. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going from around as I'm tying things up, and this is sort of more detail work. This is the part where a lot of times people don't quite know where to go, and this is what we call sort of the tie up detail work. And there's some things you could do without getting a lot of by just giving a sort of a sense of this shape. We've got these bumps, and this one I'm letting go right off. So right here is in this button area, let's call it the button. It's kind of like the belly button down there, but that's really where it gets dark, and down here is quite dark as well. There's also a light side to that. Sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to mix something on the light side of something so dark. It's not really a green, it's sort of a gray green, so I'm going to gray it down by adding the complement, which is red. Alright, and then I'll come up here and see if I can bump that in there. I can make it a little bit lighter. Let's add a little bit of the cool yellow. Get it up a little bit lighter. It's better than adding white, because the white will kill it. The yellow will bring it up a little bit more, and if we get it a little too green or more than what we see, remember what's more important is if you got the value correct, you can push the colors. It's okay, you can push the colors a little bit. That's a nice green anyway. So this one's a little more challenging to sort of show what's happening with the Coarse Shadow because it's so bumpy. But we're just catching little bits of light. Catching a little bit of light right there and a little bit right there. So it feels like it's going down around and down into this area here where it gets darker. And we can wrap this around and come in here where it gets darker like this. And we see a little bit of reflected light down here. Remember, the reflected lights aren't going to be so great. It's a little bit too much, so and that just goes right off the edge, so we just got to let that go right off the edge there. All right, well, it's really starting to come together. One thing I'll probably do is get back down in here and on the tabletop. I can tie some things up. I can make things a little bit more interesting by getting some of the lights, the light area on the, this is really too yellow. That's kind of what it is up there though. It's kind of this beech wood up there. But if yeah, that's nice. So I can again do a couple of things of working in this area. This is really where it got a lot of the light happening. And the paint's quite thick now. As this moves back, I don't want to keep this intense color all the way back. That's moving back and away from me, so I'm going to leave that. But this color in here. This is that little hole right there is so good. It kind of opens up to some breathing room. Since we're lifting the apple up here, I'm going to shape that corner of the cast shadow there a little bit, and then this one. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll go around and then I'll let this drag. This is called the backhand stroke, and it's like, and I'll let it drag off. And I'm going to darken this a little bit. I'm just getting a little bit of the blue, because if I darken it a little bit, as it moves away from the light source and I get it a little darker, then you'll have a little bit more drama where the light's gathering here. This is not so light back here. And I want your eyes to be up here anyway in these areas here. Okay, well, I think we're about there for a demo. I'm going to pop in just a couple of highlights back here. Be careful with these highlights because they're just so easy to overdo them. There's just a couple here, and sometimes I'll soften the bottom of it. Not quite that much. There we go. And then I want to sort of re-establish the highlights I was doing up here on this. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but we've got to see if, yeah, see that. Just a little bit of a lighter area right here. It's a nice stroke. That's the thing we try to do. We try to do strokes and leave them. That's kind of the challenge. It's a hard thing to do sometimes. This is a bit of a cast shadow, and then it goes back into sort of a coarse shadow here again, so we need to get that bit of a core back here again, like I've got up here. And then we can feather it off here like that. Blend it back there, and it gets into this. Blend it, into blending it down into the reflected light. Much better. Haven't done a whole lot on these. These are kind of in the background. Might be a bit of a highlight. It's because we see it back there. A little bit more than that. I was checking through the mirror. I always check through my mirror. All right, well, that's about it. Sometimes you can cover this whole thing up. Sometimes I'll leave it just because I kind of like this, but sometimes it's kind of nice to see what it would be like if we didn't have the, if we just covered more of this. Sometimes it puts focus back down onto this. Let's just see. We just finish this out to the edge. Sometimes I like the unfinished edge, but sometimes what this does, oh yeah, that's nice. It brings the focus back to here, and see those are areas of the painting that, oh yeah, and I have a little bit of a darker area here where I want that to really pop because of the simultaneous contrast there. All right, well, let's call that good for now. I just was thinking that I added a few little accents. This little dark here was really helpful. But we didn't talk a lot about edges, but you want to make sure that your edges feel appropriate for what you're doing. Sometimes if we get too hard of an edge, it might look cut out, but sometimes if we get too soft overall. So we want hard and soft edges. You notice here where I actually made this edge a little harder, because if we paint, we try to paint in the way that our eye sees. Sometimes the camera will pick everything up equally and everything will be very sharp. But if I want, say if I really want you to look here, if you're looking in this area, this edge will naturally be sharper and everything else would be in a bit of your peripheral vision, so that these edges here would be a little bit less sharp. Now I'm not talking about too much, but see the back end of my brush, I'm just sort of softening this edge, and it's just very little. The other thing that the softening of the edge does on these round forms is that it sort of sends the form back like this. It softens that edge, and all of a sudden it feels like it's turning back. I've got these edges quite soft here because they're really in the peripheral vision. This is kind of a little focal area too, so some of these edges are harder. This edge right along this cast shadow is quite hard. These are really soft because of the coarse shadow, but there's a, let's put just a little bit of that was a nice little shadow. It's behind that stem, and then up here we might see that. That brings it into a little bit more. So I just wanted to mention a little bit more about edges, and really edges really can make or break a painting. Okay.